The bullet whistled past Sophia Zimmer's ear, sending a shower of wooden splinters from the doorframe as she ducked inside the dilapidated barn. Her heart pounded against her ribcage, breath coming in ragged gasps as she pressed her back against the weathered wall. This wasn't how she'd imagined her new beginning in Cottonwood Springs would start. "You can't hide forever, you thieving wretch." The angry voice of Hank Wilcox, the town's self-appointed lawkeeper, boomed across the yard. "Nobody steals from my store, and lives to tell about it." Sophia hadn't stolen anything. The bread had been payment for the 3 dresses she'd mended for his wife. But Mrs. Wilcox had passed suddenly 2 days ago, and now her husband claimed no knowledge of any arrangement. When Sophia had tried to explain, he'd called her a liar, a thief, and worse names that reminded her too much of her past. The year was 1878, and the Wyoming Territory was still wild in ways that went beyond the untamed landscape. For a woman alone, it was a dangerous place. For a woman with Sophia's history, it was nearly impossible. She slid down the wall, wincing as her bad leg gave out. The old injury courtesy of her late husband had never healed properly, leaving her with a pronounced limp that marked her as different. Broken, they'd called her back in Chicago. Damaged goods. It was why she'd fled west, hoping to outrun the whispers that followed her everywhere. "Come out now, and maybe I'll just have you flogged instead of hanged." Wilcox shouted, closer now. Sophia's eyes darted around the barn. There was a small window at the back, barely large enough for her to squeeze through. If she could make it to the creek beyond, she might lose him in the willows. As she pushed herself to her feet, the barn door flew open, sunlight silhouetting Wilcox's bulky frame. "Found you," he growled, raising his pistol. The crack of a rifle split the air, and Wilcox's hat flew off his head. He yelped, dropping to the ground. "That was a warning shot, Wilcox," a deep voice drawled from outside. "The next one won't be aimed at your hat." Sophia froze, unsure if this new arrival was savior or another threat. "This ain't your business, Forrester," Wilcox snarled, though he remained crouched low. "You're pointing a gun at a woman on my property. That makes it my business." The man's voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of steel. "Now drop the pistol and clear out." After a tense moment, Wilcox tossed his gun aside. "This ain't over," he muttered, but shuffled out of the barn with his hands raised. Sophia remained pressed against the wall, watching as a tall figure stepped into the doorway. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, rifle held casually, but ready. "You all right, madam?" he asked, keeping his distance. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Preston Forrester," he said, tipping his hat. "This is my land you're trespassing on." The man before her was undeniably a cowboy down to his worn boots. Dust from the trail clung to his clothes, and a week's worth of beard shadowed his jaw. But his blue eyes were clear and steady as they assessed her. "I'm sorry," Sophia managed, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know. I was just trying to get away from Wilcox." "Yeah, he tends to have that effect on people." Preston leaned his rifle against the doorframe. "Are you hurt?" "No." The lie came automatically. Her leg was throbbing, but that was an old pain, not a new one. Preston's gaze flickered to the way she favored her right leg, but he didn't comment. "You got somewhere to go?" Sophia hesitated. She'd rented a small room above the dressmaker's shop, but after this incident with Wilcox, she doubted she'd be welcome in town anymore. "I thought so," he said, correctly interpreting her silence. "My ranch house is about a mile north. My housekeeper, Mrs. Hendricks, can get you settled in the guest room for tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out what to do about Wilcox." "Why would you help me?" Suspicion edged her voice. In her experience, men didn't offer assistance without expecting something in return. Preston's expression softened slightly. "Because where I come from, we don't let bullies chase women across the countryside. And we certainly don't let them go hungry or sleep in barns." He stepped back, giving her space. "You don't have to come, but there's food and a safe place to sleep if you want it." Sophia weighed her options. She could try to make it to the next town, but her meager savings wouldn't last long, and her leg wouldn't carry her far. Or she could trust this stranger who had, at the very least, prevented her from being shot. "Thank you," she said finally. "I'm Sophia. Sophia Zimmer." Preston nodded, as if her acceptance was expected. "Can you ride, Miss Zimmer?" "I can manage." Another lie. She'd never been on a horse in her life. His slight smile told her he wasn't fooled. You'll ride with me then. It'll be easier on your leg. The ride to Preston's ranch was silent, but not uncomfortable. Sophia sat sideways in front of him on the saddle, his arms around her as he held the reins. She was acutely aware of the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the gentle strength in the hands that guided the horse. It had been a long time since she'd been this close to a man without fear. Preston's ranch house was modest but well-built, with a wide porch and sturdy walls that looked like they could withstand the Wyoming winters. Mrs. Hendricks, a round-faced woman with kind eyes and graying hair, took one look at Sophia and immediately started fussing. Look at you, poor thing. Thin as a rail and white as a sheet. Let's get you inside and fed. She shot Preston a look that clearly said she approved of him bringing home a stray. Within an hour, Sophia found herself clean, wearing a borrowed nightgown, and sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of hearty stew in front of her. Preston had disappeared to tend to his horse, leaving her alone with Mrs. Hendricks. Mr. Forrester said Wilcox was after you, the housekeeper said, setting a plate of cornbread beside Sophia's bowl. That man's been nothing but trouble since his wife passed. He accused me of stealing, Sophia explained, relaxing slightly in the older woman's presence. I'm a seamstress. I made dresses for Mrs. Wilcox, and she gave me food as part payment. Mrs. Hendricks snorted. Sounds like Sarah Wilcox. Always generous, despite being married to that miser. She sat down across from Sophia. You're welcome here as long as you need, dear. Mr. Forrester doesn't say much, but when he does speak, he means it. I won't impose for long, Sophia promised. Just until I can figure out where to go next. The housekeeper studied her thoughtfully. You know, I've been after Mr. Forrester to hire someone to help with the mending and such. I'm not as young as I used to be, and these old fingers don't thread needles like they once did. Sophia paused mid-bite. Are you suggesting just something to consider? Mrs. Hendricks said with a wink. Now eat up before it gets cold. Later that night, lying in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Sophia stared at the ceiling and considered her situation. Preston Forrester seemed decent enough, and his housekeeper was genuinely kind. But Sophia had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Her late husband had seemed kind too, at first. She touched the faded scar that ran along her collarbone, a permanent reminder of how quickly kindness could turn to cruelty. No, she wouldn't stay here. She'd rest, regain her strength, and move on. She had to keep moving if she wanted to stay ahead of her past. Morning brought the smell of coffee and bacon. Sophia dressed in her own clothes, now clean and pressed thanks to Mrs. Hendricks, and made her way to the kitchen. Preston was already there, reading a newspaper at the table. He looked up when she entered, his eyes taking in her appearance. You look better, he said simply. I feel better. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Forrester. Preston, he corrected, folding the newspaper. And you're welcome to it for as long as you need. Mrs. Hendricks set a plate in front of Sophia. I was just telling Mr. Forrester about my idea, she said cheerfully. About you helping with the sewing around here. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. I couldn't possibly. Actually, it's not a bad idea, Preston interrupted. Ranch work is hard on clothes. We could use someone with your skills. I don't want charity, Sophia said, her voice firmer than she intended. Preston's eyes met hers directly. It's not charity if you earn your keep. Fair wage for fair work. There was no pity in his gaze, only a straightforward offer. It was refreshing. I'll think about it, she conceded. Good. In the meantime, you should know that Wilcox rode out this morning with 2 of his cronies. Looks like they're headed to the marshal in Laramie to file charges against you. Sophia's stomach dropped. But I didn't steal anything. I know that. But Wilcox has friends in Laramie. It'll be your word against his. Then I should leave right away, Sophia said, pushing back from the table. I can't drag you into my troubles. Preston's hand on her arm stopped her, his touch light but firm. Running will only make you look guilty. Besides, where would you go? Without money or transportation? He was right, and they both knew it. Stay, he said quietly. At least until we can sort this out. I've sent a rider to fetch Samuel Davis, a lawyer friend from Cheyenne. He'll know how to handle Wilcox. The sincerity in his eyes made it hard to refuse. Why are you doing all this for me? Preston released her arm, his expression thoughtful. Let's just say I recognize someone who's been running too long. Over the next week, Sophia settled into a routine at the ranch. She mended shirts and linens, helped Mrs. Hendricks with the cooking, and gradually grew more comfortable with Preston's presence. He was unlike any man she'd known, quiet but not brooding, strong but never intimidating. She learned that he'd come west after the war, buying land when it was still cheap and building his ranch from nothing. He employed a handful of cowhands, treated them fairly, and had earned their loyalty. No one mentioned her situation, but she noticed how they kept watch on the road from town, how they never left her alone at the house. On her 8th day at the ranch, Preston found her sitting on the porch, her sewing forgotten in her lap, as she watched the sunset paint the distant mountains gold. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Yes," she agreed. "I never saw skies like this in Chicago. Is that where you're from?" Sophia nodded, surprised at how easily the truth came. "I left after my husband died." Preston was silent for a moment. "I'm sorry for your loss." A bitter laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "Don't be." Edward was not a kind man. Understanding dawned in Preston's eyes as they flickered to the scar at her collarbone, visible above the neckline of her dress. "Is that why they call you broken?" Sophia stiffened. "How did you?" Wilcox has been talking. In his version, you're a broken woman running from debts and disgrace in the East. Shame burned through her. "And you believe him?" "I believe there's more to your story than either Wilcox or the gossips know." Preston turned to face her fully. "But I also believe that whatever happened in your past doesn't define who you are now." Tears pricked at her eyes, and she blinked them away hastily. "Most people don't see it that way." "I'm not most people." His hand covered hers gently. "And neither are you, Sophia Zimmer." The simple touch, the warmth in his voice when he said her name, it undid something inside her. For the first time in years, Sophia felt seen. Not as a victim, not as damaged goods, but as a woman worthy of respect. Edward was a banker, she found herself saying. Respected, wealthy, charming in public. Behind closed doors, he was different. The words came haltingly at first, then faster as the dam broke. "The first time he hit me was 3 months after our wedding. I'd ordered the wrong tea for a dinner party. He broke my wrist." Preston's hand tightened slightly over hers, but he remained silent, letting her speak. "It got worse after that. If dinner was cold, if I spoke to another man, if I wore a dress he didn't approve of, anything could set him off. The last time," her voice caught. "The last time, he pushed me down the stairs. That's how my leg was injured. The doctor said I was lucky to be able to walk at all." "What happened to him?" Preston asked quietly. "Influenza. He caught it that winter and was gone within a week." Sophia wiped at a stray tear. "Everyone said how tragic it was, how much I must miss him. They brought casseroles and offered prayers, while I could only feel relief that he was gone." "That's why you left Chicago?" She nodded. "People saw the way I limped, how I flinched at loud noises. They whispered that I was broken, that no man would want me now." A bitter smile twisted her lips. As if that was the worst thing that could happen to a woman. Preston was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and fierce. "You're not broken, Sophia. You survived. That takes a kind of strength most people will never understand." His words washed over her like a benediction. No one had ever seen her resilience as strength before. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky, their hands still joined. When Mrs. Hendricks called them in for dinner, something had shifted between them. A trust had formed, fragile but real. The lawyer, Samuel Davis, arrived the next day. He was a sharp-eyed man with a no-nonsense manner that Sophia immediately appreciated. "Wilcox has filed charges," he confirmed after greeting them. "But his case is weak. No witnesses, no evidence, just his word against yours." "So what do we do?" Preston asked. "We counterfile," Davis said simply. "Assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder. From what you've told me, he fired at Miss Zimmer with intent to harm. But will anyone believe me over him?" Sophia asked, voicing her deepest fear. Davis smiled thinly. "They'll believe Preston. He's got a reputation for honesty that even Wilcox can't tarnish. And they'll believe Mrs. Wilcox's diary." "Her diary?" Preston and Sophia asked in unison. "I took the liberty of speaking with Sarah Wilcox's sister in Laramie," Davis explained. "Apparently, Sarah kept detailed accounts of household expenses. The diary clearly notes the arrangement with you, Miss Zimmer. 3 dresses in exchange for store credit. Relief flooded through Sophia. So it's over? Not quite, Davis cautioned. Wilcox won't take this lying down. He's a proud man with a mean streak. But legally, you're in the clear. True to the lawyer's prediction, Wilcox didn't give up easily. Over the next month, he spread rumors about Sophia throughout the county. She was a thief, a con woman, a fallen woman hiding a shameful past. Some believed him, but many didn't, especially after Preston made it clear that Sophia was under his protection. During this time, Sophia became an integral part of the ranch. What had started as temporary help with mending expanded into cooking alongside Mrs. Hendricks, keeping the account books, and even assisting with the cattle when extra hands were needed. She discovered a talent for organization that Preston quickly came to rely on. More importantly, she began to heal. The nightmares that had plagued her since Edward's death grew less frequent. She no longer flinched when a door slammed or when Preston raised his voice to call to one of his men across the yard. Her legs still troubled her, especially in damp weather, but she grew stronger with the physical work of ranch life. And then there was Preston himself. He never pushed, never pressed for more than she was ready to give. But he was always there, a steadying presence, a quiet strength she could lean on if she chose to. His respect for her boundaries only made her trust him more. Spring was giving way to summer when everything changed. Sophia was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Shading her eyes against the sun, she saw a rider coming too fast. "Preston," she called toward the barn where he was mending tack. He emerged immediately, hand moving to the pistol at his hip when he saw her expression. Following her gaze to the approaching rider, his stance shifted, ready for trouble. The rider, one of Preston's youngest ranch hands, barely 18, nearly fell from his horse as he pulled up. "Mr. Forrester, it's Wilcox. He's drunk and making threats in town. Says he's coming for Miss Zimmer." Preston's jaw tightened. "How many men with him?" "3, sir. All armed. Get inside," Preston told Sophia, his voice brooking no argument. "Lock the doors and stay away from the windows." "What are you going to do?" She couldn't keep the fear from her voice. "Meet them before they get here." He turned to the young cowhand. "Ride to the north pasture. Tell Jenkins and the others to get back to the house now." As the young man galloped off, Preston strode toward the stable for his horse. Sophia followed, her heart hammering in her chest. "You can't go alone," she protested. "There are 4 of them. I won't let them bring their fight here," he said firmly, saddling his horse with practiced speed. "Not where you and Mrs. Hendricks could get caught in the crossfire." "Then I'm coming with you." Preston paused, turning to look at her with surprise. "It's too dangerous." "This is my fight too," Sophia insisted. "I'm tired of running, Preston. Tired of letting men like Wilcox dictate my life." Something flickered in his eyes, pride, mixed with concern. "Can you shoot?" "No. But I can ride now, thanks to you. And I can face Wilcox." Preston considered her for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay behind me. If things go wrong, you ride hard back to the house. Promise me." "I promise." They met Wilcox and his men at the boundary of Preston's property. The 4 riders pulled up short when they saw Preston and Sophia waiting for them. Wilcox's face was flushed with whiskey and anger, his hand resting on his holstered gun. Well, he slurred. "The thief and her protector." "That's far enough, Wilcox," Preston called, his voice calm but carrying. "You're trespassing on my land." "I've come for what's mine," Wilcox snarled, gesturing toward Sophia. "That woman stole from me, and she'll pay." "We both know that's not true," Preston replied. "Sarah's diary proved it. The marshal has dismissed your charges." "I don't care about the marshal," Wilcox shouted. "She disrespected me, made me look a fool." Sophia urged her horse forward, ignoring Preston's warning glance. "I did nothing wrong, Mr. Wilcox. Your wife and I had an agreement. She was a fair and honest woman." "Don't you talk about my wife." Wilcox's hand moved to his gun. "Is this how you honor her memory?" Sophia pressed, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "By threatening innocent women? By drinking yourself into a rage? What would Sarah think of you now?" Wilcox's face contorted with fury, but uncertainty flickered in his bloodshot eyes. "Go home, Hank," Preston said, softer now. "Sleep it off. This isn't what Sarah would want." For a tense moment, it seemed Wilcox might draw his weapon. Then, Unexpectedly, his shoulders sagged. "She's gone," he mumbled, suddenly looking old and broken. "She's gone, and I don't know what to do." "I know," Preston said, and the simple compassion in his voice struck Sophia deeply. Losing someone you love changes everything. Wilcox stared at them for a long moment, then turned his horse. "Come on, boys," he said to his companions. "There's nothing for us here." They watched in silence as the four men rode away. Only when they were out of sight did Sophia release the breath she'd been holding. "Do you think it's over?" she asked. Preston nodded slowly. "I think so. Grief does strange things to a man, but I believe he heard you." As they rode back to the ranch side by side, Sophia felt something settle within her, a sense of closure, of standing her ground instead of running. She glanced at Preston, studying the strong line of his jaw, the steadiness of his hands on the reins. In that moment, she realized what had been growing between them all these months. It wasn't just gratitude she felt for this quiet cowboy. It was something deeper, something she'd thought she'd never feel again after Edward. Trust. And with that trust had come something else: love. The realization should have frightened her, but instead, it filled her with a quiet certainty. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the fireflies emerge, Sophia found the courage to speak her heart. "I've been thinking about moving on," she said softly. Preston's face remained impassive, but she saw the slight tension in his shoulders. "If that's what you want," he said carefully, "you've more than earned enough for a fresh start somewhere." "That's not what I want." She turned to face him fully. "I don't want to leave, Preston, but I need to know if there's a place for me here. Not as your seamstress or housekeeper, but as something more." The hope that bloomed in his eyes took her breath away. "Sophia," he said, her name a caress on his lips. "There's been a place for you here since the day you arrived. I just didn't want to rush you or make you feel obligated." "I don't feel obligated," she assured him. "I feel whole, for the first time in years. You've never treated me like I was broken." Preston reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Because you never were. Wounded, yes. Scarred, certainly. But those are marks of survival, not brokenness." She leaned toward him, and he met her halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was tender and unhurried. When they parted, Sophia felt tears on her cheeks, not tears of sorrow, but of release, of letting go of the past, and embracing the possibility of a future. "I love you," Preston said simply. "I think I've loved you since I found you in that barn, standing your ground even when you were terrified." "I love you too," Sophia replied, the words coming easily, naturally. "You taught me that I could be more than my scars." Their second kiss was deeper, a promise of all that was to come. Summer gave way to fall, and fall to winter. On a crisp December day in 1879, Sophia Zimmer became Sophia Forrester in a small ceremony at the ranch. Mrs. Hendricks cried happy tears, the ranch hands cheered, and even Hank Wilcox, sober now for months, attended with a gift of fabric from his store. As Preston slipped the ring onto her finger, Sophia thought of how far she had come. The limp remained, a reminder of darker days, but it no longer defined her. She was a wife again, but this time to a man who saw her strength rather than sought to break it. She was a respected member of the community, known for her kindness and skill with a needle. Most importantly, she was whole. Not because Preston had fixed her, she had never been broken to begin with, but because he had created a space where she could heal, where love could flourish in the place where pain had once taken root. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Preston whispered in her ear, "Happy." Sophia looked up at him, at the love shining clear in his eyes, and smiled. Completely. And she was. The whispers had stopped, the nightmares had faded, and in their place was this: a love built on respect and understanding, a home filled with warmth, and a future bright with possibility. They would face challenges, of course. Life in the Wyoming Territory was never easy, but Sophia knew now that she was strong enough to meet whatever came. And with Preston beside her, she was ready for all of it: the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and setbacks that made up a life well lived. In the years that followed, their family grew. A son with Preston's blue eyes and Sophia's quiet determination. A daughter with a laugh that filled the ranch house with joy. And as Sophia watched them grow, she taught them the most important lesson she had learned: that love, true love, could heal what pain had tried to destroy. That was her legacy, not the scars she carried, but the love she had found the courage to embrace.